Welcome to Talkin' Shit, the podcast where we get real about the unfiltered truths women face in the quest for perfection. I'm Jana, your host, a dietitian and fellow woman navigating the pressure to have it all together, the perfect body, career, relationships, and making it all look effortless. Who set that standard anyway? Here, we're calling out the diet fads, hustle culture, beauty standards, and everything else that keeps us feeling stuck. But we're not just venting, we're diving into how to break free and rewrite the rules on your terms. So, grab a coffee or a glass of wine and let's talk some shit. Together, we'll uncover how to live a life that's unapologetically yours. This is Talkin' Shit. Let's dive in. Hey, friend, quick question before we dive into today's episode. Does dinner stress you out more than it should? Because if you're like most women I talk to, figuring out what to make every single night feels like another full-time job. So if you're tired of the daily what's for dinner stress, I've got something just for you. I've created the What's for Dinner guide with 50 quick, healthy, and blood sugar friendly recipes that are perfect whether you're cooking for yourself or your whole family. No more second guessing, no more last minute takeout, just real food made simple. Grab your copy for just $9, click the link in the show notes, and make dinner the easiest part of your day. All right. Now I'm back to the episode. But seriously, don't wait. Your weeknight sanity will thank you. All right, so today I'm really excited because I have Rae-Anne that is going to be sharing her experience. So just a little backstory for those of you that are listening. Rae-Anne and I connected in 2019. And we've stayed connected throughout that time. And I've just grown to love Rae-Anne, and her story is just amazing and powerful. And so she's been so gracious to be able to share with us just a little bit about that story and hopefully create more awareness around how this can really come about and the struggle really that food can have and the impact that it can have on our body and our mind really is a big one too. So Rae-Anne, thank you so much for being willing to be here with us.
Thank you, Janet, for having me. Do you want me to just jump right in?
Let's jump right in. Where would you like to
begin? Okay, so my name is Rae-Anne, and I have been recovering from an eating disorder. At times it was anorexic, sometimes it was bulimic, and just compulsive overeating for the last 30 years. It started when I was really young. I can remember my mom and the tapes that, be careful of what you're eating because one of these days you're not going to be able to eat that. And, the models on TV, everything as a little girl, we wanted to be the princess, the model, the thin one, or I did. And my mom, because of her, the way she grew up and was a little overweight, it kind of just transferred on to me. What I didn't know back then was that she didn't want me to suffer like she was or have to go through that. But of course, when we, hound it without any explanation, it kind of turns itself, manifests a big hole in me. And so I can just remember from a really young age of wanting to go on a diet and exercise. I've always been really active. So, it wasn't so much about, no, I'll back up. I was able to eat whatever I wanted because I was so active when I was younger. And I'm talking like third, fourth, fifth grade. I, played sports and danced and did gymnastics and rode horses that I never gained the weight. It's when I, started getting into high school that it changed. And I can remember in the 7th, the 8th grade is when I really said, I can't, I want to change the way I look, because if I change the way I look, I'll feel better. And I didn't realize the reason why I didn't feel better. I didn't know, growing up in a dysfunctional home, I didn't know that I just wanted to be normal. I thought that everybody's life was perfect and mine was in chaos. And if I could control something, because I couldn't control anything, that I'd be okay. And I searched for that okay forever, until I was 28 years old.
Yeah.
And, so at a very young age, yeah, and diet pills were legal back then, so I could go to the drugstore and get them. My mom had them, and that was starting that, and then restricting. I remember being in high school and going through weeks of time of restricting and not being able to play sports very well because I had no energy. And so then, I quit because I was thin, and it was all about thin and more, if you really knew me, you wouldn't like me. But so if my outside was perfect, then you would think I was perfect, that I got, my life together. And it was a mess. I was dying inside. I was trying to fill up this hole in my stomach with anything that would make me feel okay, whatever okay was. At the time, I didn't know what that was. So, I did all the diets. Oh gosh, there's so many of them. When I started working with Jana, she had me list them, and there were a lot. Oh, I, you know,
What did the diets do for you? Right? Like you mentioned, like you felt like you just weren't okay. It sounds like in your body, right? Like something felt off. But it also sounds like you went to the diet and you mentioned like anorexia, bulimia, then overeating, right? Like, so it sounds like it really shifted throughout the years. But what did they provide for you?
well, the diets gave me a sense of control, because you can only eat this, this, and this, and it's a restriction. So I could follow, I could lose weight, I can never maintain it, uh,
Mm.
because I would, say I lost 10 pounds, but then within the next month I would gain 20 back, because it's like, oh, I get to eat this now. And I the restricting. Well, there was those restricting where I wouldn't eat anything or just chew stuff and spit it out. And I didn't like that because I was so active. So I wanted to be able to play sports or, do things, and dance. And then the diet pills though helped with not eating as much. So I felt like I was controlling that. And then the diets, certain diet was a control. It came all about control because my life was out of control. You know, I love my mother, and she did the best she could. And both of my parents did. And I know that today. But I always felt like I was controlled by her, criticized what I wore, who I was with, my grades, all that stuff. Um, I look back and I saw it all as a negative thing, like I'm not good enough.
Mm.
And um, and I was always trying to better that. Well, food was the only thing I could control. So when she says, "Oh, you shouldn't eat that," of course, I'm going to go in my room and I'm going to eat that. So that's where overeating comes in, and then the bulemic part. I abused exercise, and the diet pills, and then during college and afterwards, it was like speed, because it was cheaper, easier to get. You didn't have to go into a drugstore, and that helped too. But eventually, it took a toll on my heart too, and I just got so sick and tired of playing the game. And you could tell me, "Oh, you look great." But my mind didn't see that. I would look in the mirror and I would see someone heavy, sad, and, oh, I better I better, go work this off. I can remember in college just crazy, insane things like chewing your food and then spitting it out. But, you know, working out in the morning and then going to class and then going hitting a noon class, workout class, and then going back to school, and then in the evening hitting another class. Who works out 3 times a day? I did that for a period of times, thinking that was the answer. I always thought if I was at this number, I'd be happy,
Mm.
and I never was happy at that number. I had to do a complete transformation on the inside of why I was trying, what I was trying to fill up, why I was feeling different, and what I needed to do to make me feel okay. And I found that it wasn't the alcohol, it wasn't the drugs, it certainly wasn't the food, you know. those were just band-aids to how I was feeling inside.
Yeah. What so even it sounds like at the height of, and it's interesting, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but it sounds like, you said like exercising 3 times a day. I'm thinking of right now, there is a diet called 75 hard, and it encourages individuals to do 2 a days at least. Right. And so it's interesting because there's a spectrum, and it's a very slippery slope between engaging in healthy habits or dieting in order to lose weight in a healthy fashion and some eating disorder practices. So, when you were really struggling the most, what were those behaviors that you were engaging in on a daily basis? And what was the thought behind those behaviors? Like, what was really driving that?
Um, well, for the most part, it was not to feel less than, not good enough. I'm never going to measure up. So I would do anything that, mind altering or not, to take that away. And exercise was like that endorphin where it just went, took me out of who I was. I would do anything that would change the way I feel. And I couldn't do it just, a little bit. I had to go all the way. And I think back now, 30 years ago, I mean, there's still those diets, there's always going to be a diet that immediately I think, ooh, maybe that's the one. But I know from all the experience in the years that there is not one diet. That the insanity of doing those, of thinking that it's going to be different this time, you know, and even with the exercise, if I'm exercising, if I'm doing something, I'm not thinking about what I'm sad about or what I feel less than, or I'm focusing on something else. Yeah, it might be healthy, but it's not that. It's excess, and that's how I was living my life, and thinking it was okay, thinking it was normal, because you saw other people with workout clothes or shorts at school, so they must be doing it too. And I didn't have anyone really to talk to. No, that's not, well, yeah, I didn't until I got a little older. Through a series of events, I started going to a therapist for other issues, and it was so obvious in my family about my erratic behavior, and I wouldn't talk to you. I was depressed. I mean, my emotions were like this, and so it was very obvious about my eating habits and disorders. We didn't know if it was a disorder then. It was just my eating habits or my crazy ideas or things that I was doing, staple in the ear, acupuncture type thing. And so when I said, yeah, I need to go to an eating disorder hospital, my family's like, yeah, okay, about time. So, I was 28 and I was scared. And for a year, I wouldn't go. I kept making up excuses.
Mm.
And I got to a point where I couldn't do it anymore. And it was, with my alcoholism too. I was so tired of being sick and tired of playing this game, it was just mental and spiritual and physical. Just couldn't do it anymore. And I had 2 babies, and I did not want them to grow up like I did. So I really, part of me wanted to had a little bit of therapy in there. So I wanted to stop this cycle. And I wanted to live, even though I was at a point, I was like, I just don't want to live. I don't want to do this anymore. You get to the point, I got to the point, it was like, I'd be better off just not waking up, but I was a chicken. I wasn't going to do anything.
So, what made you open to going to therapy in the first place? Because that's a big step.
Yeah, so my middle brother got sober, and he went to a rehab. And at this rehab, the family gets involved, and I wasn't married at the time. And so uh, they were like, everybody gets a label in the family, like the people pleaser, and how addiction will manifest in different ways in different members. And so I was that one. And, I heard something. And then, my dad and brother got sober, and it was like they're living this life. It's like, wow, okay, they're doing something right. So I needed to fix me. I didn't know what was wrong. And that's the whole thing way back when. It's easy now for me to identify these things. But back then I didn't know what was wrong with me. And that is like for a little kid to have something wrong with them is is really sad and really scary, because there was nothing wrong with me. It
Mhm.
was just that was life, and I didn't know how to handle it.
Mhm.
I thought, oh, this is the cure. This is the cure.
Mhm.
And then, so I went to this therapist, and I mean, there's a lot of little different issues going on with me, and part of it is like, well, I want to fix me. So I went, and she wasn't afraid to call things out on me and ask me why I do this and that. And is that normal? Well, yeah, that's normal to me. And she said, well, that's not normal to other people. So like I said, I finally, after it was probably 2 or 3 years of it, I couldn't lie anymore. I couldn't play the game. I don't know. I was really just at a place. I was so depressed, and just knew knew there was something that I could do. I just wasn't quite sure, but I could really, with the eating part, I could, yeah, I can see that. I can identify that's my problem, And so, the joke for me, I'll say in meetings, is that, I'm a I went into an eating disorder hospital as a anorexic bulimic and came out an alcoholic. And the truth is that I knew that if I wanted any chance at a life, at a happy life, a purposeful life, that I had to come clean with everything. And that's what I did. And when back then 30 years ago, I had the nutritionist lady told me, or the one that makes all your plans, say, yeah, I think you could lose a little weight. Well, me at that time, I was, on the higher end. I'm thinking I'm looking good. And she goes telling me that. I was like, oh, not see, I need to. But it was more of a health issue. And, and I mean, it was like 5 pounds, you know, and then, but my heart from all the speed, that it was really taking a toll. And so I had to look at that. And, I don't want my heart to explode or do damage. So that kind of was a scare. But that kind of happened before too, and it wasn't enough. It wasn't until I got to the place where it's like, okay, I'm ready. And when I was ready, I to my innermost self, you have some issues that you need to deal with. And I did. And, you know, my really from day one, my thing was if I eat it, I own it. So no throwing up, no X-lax, no obsessive exercise. And then that's really been what I've kind of stayed with for 30 years. But at one time, it was while I was down there, they taught me, 3 meals a day with 2 snacks. Well, I did that for a long time. And then, life just changes. And um, I wouldn't say I'm cured of this because it's always going to be there. I mean, I have a disease that I have to have a little bit of it every day. And if you want to call it a drug, the drug of food, I have to have it a little bit of every day. I can't be completely abstinence like with alcohol or, drugs or anything like that. So, I have to figure out ways to deal with it. And I go along for years and fine. Then all of a sudden, I hear, oh, you're supposed to have more protein and stuff. Or I go to a gym and they say, if you want, here's a great myth that if I go to the gym and I work out with weights, I'm going to get big and muscular. And I had to learn, no, it's okay, because I was truly afraid that I was just going to be this big, stocky person, um, and it would take a lot well, I guess if I was eating a lot of junk food and stuff I could, but it takes a lot of protein and preciseness to get like that big. I don't, but that was a fallacy back then, and I was afraid to eat I went through a period of time where I was afraid to eat too much. So I was restricting, ate too little, and so that I was hungry. So when I'm hungry, I get very hangry around 3 o'clock, and then I'm like, well, I'm just going to eat this, you know. And it really wasn't until, well, about 2019, Jana, when I called you, that I had another shift again in food. And I think it was the first time in my life that I actually had or have a healthy relationship with food. Because up until then, I've never really talked about that, never been asked that.
Mhm.
And the suggestions like the intuitive eating, eating slower, and then kind of savoring that food. What's it feel like? Am I hungry? Am I not hungry? Am I full now? Wait. And they're I call them tools, like it because I'm the type of person though, I was like, okay, I'm not gonna have just one cookie. If I see a cookie, I'm gonna eat them all. But if I'm mindful about it and say, okay, here's a perfect example, Halloween. We have the big cans. I wait, to buy that candy, but then I obsess about it. And that's a big thing. Normal people don't obsess about the food, about the weight. Um, so so I don't buy it early, but maybe I'll wait a week or two before, and then I allow myself maybe 3 little pieces a day, and that's it. And is that controlled eating? I don't know, but it works because when I don't do that, then it's like my hands in there all day and defeats the purpose.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. So there's a lot to unpack in that, right? Like as far as like the what you experience, some of that internal dialogue, but also the external aspect of things. So it sounds like not only did you have like the experience with your mom, but it also sounds like there was even professionals that were making comments as it relates to your body, how you should eat. So there was a lot of external information coming in. But in the healing journey, the big distinction that we like to make is making the decision based on external factors or internal dialogue. So how like when you were in that eating disorder recovery facility, what were some of the tools that they did teach you that were really helpful at that time that you were able to really take into the real world, if we will, that really was like, okay, now I actually do feel like I have control over food versus it controlling me?
Good question. I think one of the first things was is that I wasn't alone because I thought I was the only one on earth that had this, what's wrong with me, this strange thing. So being down there with other women and a couple men um, that were struggling with the same thing that I was struggling with. And, one of the things that I've always done all my life is that comparing. But, and then I would think, oh, well, I didn't do that and stuff. But, oh, but I did this. So then it made me feel okay that I was on the same, level as these women trying to get better. And and that's what was cool is that it was a group to talk about these things that I have kept hidden. And if I can't talk about it and I'm not sharing it with anybody, it's a secret. And to me, secrets are a deadly place to be. And they say, you're as sick as your secrets. And that's why I liked, different groups because I'm able to share with them what's going on. And, that I'm okay, that, my brain doesn't always think like I don't even know what a normal person is, but this is how my brain thinks, and I might be saying something and my husband doesn't look at me like, whoa, you're weird. Because it's like, it's just my brain going off. Doesn't mean it's true. They're feelings. And that's something I learned down there that feelings are facts. Feelings are not facts. They're just feelings and they can't hurt me unless I act on them.
Ooh.
Just because my head tells me one thing does not mean it's true because my head's out to get me, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and that I learned that. And I also, about not eating in front of a TV or on the radio or eating in the car. And I know sometimes you need to for whatever reason. That's another thing is that um, I've noticed with a lot of people in that have eating disorders or any type of addiction problem is that, the perfect. I've got to be perfect. That was me growing up because I didn't want anybody to get upset. So I'll be the perfect child. And there's no such thing as perfect. And I know that today. I didn't know it back then. So that was something that I was starting to learn is that, okay, so you messed up at this meal. You don't need to wait till Monday. You just go right to the next one. And but the problem back then with that, I had to write it out a week in advance. Sometimes, usually it was a week in advance, and share it with someone in a 12-step program, so that I was accountable. It was a lot of planning and still thinking about food. Whereas today, because it's evolved, is that I don't do it because I'm just lazy, is what it comes to, and then I pay for it. But when I think, okay, what am I going to have for dinner this week? What are we going to have for lunches? Because now I'm retired, I have the time. I don't have that excuse of working, but I don't plan it meal by meal by meal. I think, okay, we're going to have this, and that will last a couple of days. We'll have leftovers. Got to make sure I have some vegetables in there. It's much more balanced. There's no diet. There's no, I'm a little bit like preparing. That's a big thing for me now is, usually it used to be on Sundays and sometimes it still is, but preparing for the week, that helps a lot. Even though I have all this time, I can still be late, still be lazy. So, prepping my meals, that helps so much. But what happens to me, it's not so much anymore in my head that, oh, I look good or I look bad or this food's good or bad. The good and bad are out. It's being okay with where I'm at today, whatever weight that is. And that's not always easy. Like I forgot weighing myself, 4, 5, 6 times a day. Who does that? That is crazy behavior. So now my scale's out.
Well, and it's so interesting because we've talked about this. There's a difference between we really look at the behaviors, right? Like, versus the weight. So regardless of weight, the behaviors can still be unhealthy, right? And so it sounds like you were really constantly thinking about food and really very frequently or constantly weighing yourself to gauge, and I'm going to assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, but basically to gauge if you were enough.
Yep.
So if the scale went down, did that signal that you were enough?
I was enough. I was okay.
Okay. But if the scale went up, what would happen?
Not okay. So I'm not going here. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to overeat. Now that doesn't make any sense, but to me it was because I have to punish myself.
Mm.
You know,
So
punish. Yeah.
it sounds like it had a huge impact on you, just like mentally, emotionally, spiritually, even. What impact did it have on your family and friends? Like, did you go to social events? Did you not go to social event? Like, tell me a little bit more about that.
I still went with them, to social events. I'm thinking back then, especially, if I was feeling heavier, I always wore black because black makes you thinner, or I did have, probably because I spent so much time obsessing about it, I knew what clothes to wear so that I could appear, that I wasn't heavy. And the thing is, it was all in my head, most of the time. Um, yeah, I think back now, it's crazy. Now, today, I'll go, regardless. It's just that, sometimes my head just likes to play games with me, but I don't have the scale there, and it's not that number anymore. It used to be a number, and I had unrealistic expectations, on a number, and then, what happens when I get there? Ooh, well, I'm on a roll. I might as well keep going. And what does the American Heart Association say? What does the insurance company say? All those things. It's like, do I feel good? Am I, healthy? Do I have any health problems like high cholesterol, diabetes, all those that come along with the whole thing, I just wanted to be healthy instead of today. I want to be healthy instead of thin.
Yeah. And I've shared this with you in the group so often of there's different conversations. Do you want to have a conversation around health or do you want to have a conversation around weight? Because they're very different conversations. And it sounds like you were able to really shift into being able to have the conversation with yourself first about how, like, what does my body feel like in order to be in that healthy state, which is very different for each person. There's some commonalities, right? Like movement, usually for most people, right? I would say almost everyone, it feels better to move your body, right?
Oh,
But how you go about doing that is going to be very different than your neighbor, your sister, your mom, right? Like all of those things are going to be variables.
right. And although, my immediate friends, my close friends, they aren't in, let me just say, we all struggle with food and others more. And I try to, for the most part, try not to be shaming. Like if someone loses weight, I don't say, oh, I see you've lost weight. I'll say, oh, you're looking healthy today or, now or something, something more positive instead of negative. Because we'll sit around, oh, I can't eat that dessert. And it's like, um, I just don't want to engage in that because then that sends me back into a spiral. But then I don't know, darn it. It's like I better eat. There's different ways I can handle that today. When I'm around the negative talk, I can get negative,
Mhm.
and that's a trigger for me. It just seems like sometimes the opposite things are the ones that kind of get me in a tailspin. I know for me also is boredom. I want to eat when I'm bored. Am I hungry or am I bored? It's that anxiety, you know. So I've learned, different techniques, just sitting, meditating, go for a walk. My exercise today or movement is completely different. I still work out like 3 days a week with weights. I'll
Mhm.
take my dog for a walk. You know, um, I was playing golf 2 and 3 days a week, but I had knee surgery, so I haven't been doing that. But I find different things that I enjoy
Mhm.
to find that movement because that for me, movement really clears my mind.
So are there things like so in the support system aspect, right? Like you mentioned that one of the really the powerful aspects of being able to go to recovery is was the support and feeling like I'm not alone and like other people like get it, right? Like to have the same conversation. What does that look like now? Like what type of support do you receive? And like are others able to say like, "Hey, Rae-Anne, we're noticing this. This would be a good time to maybe shift it," or like, what does that look like now?
Okay, well, they're the meetings, the 12-step meetings down here for eating disorders they're few. So it is hard. So I have to get online. And I'm not as consistent as I was maybe like 10 years ago. Well, 10 years ago, I'd actually go in person, but I'll hit and miss. The group that I joined with you once a month, um, even though I'm just starting it, I already felt a part of. And that's another thing, wanting to feel a part of. And they not only, it's not for me, it's not staying in the problem, it's the solution. And the solution is okay, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but what are we doing to get out of it? And that's why I need that extra, those people around me that are willing to do the work. And that's what, because when 30 years ago, the only place I could find was a place down south for an eating disorders hospital. There was nothing really around here um, that would take it on, and I don't know why, but and that's and there were OA meetings, but there in Fresno there was more, but in the South Valley there weren't as many. And then can I get to there at that time? So now it's so much more available, and it's not the stigma, although I still think that an eating disorder has more of a stigma than any other, alcohol, drugs, smoking, gambling, whatever, you know.
do you think that
I,
is?
I don't. I don't know. I've never really asked a normal person why, or next time someone says them. But I think our society has in the past expected women to be a certain way, a certain size, a certain, I mean, you can see it. It's great now because, the models are not those really tall, thin models anymore. I mean, yeah, we still have them, but, a lot of the companies are showing different anthropology. They're showing two different sizes, and I was like, okay, yeah, you have the real thin one, and then you have the realistic one. So that's what I'm going to look like in this one, not that one, because my mind will go, oh, if I wear that, I'm going to look like that, And so there's a lot more help today, a lot more. It's just that you know um, it's taking that risk and saying, hey, I need help, I don't want to feel like this anymore, whatever this is. And and reaching out, and you're one perfect one to help with that, with because nutrition has changed since back then, and that's you've helped me tremendous. And it's scary, it's really scary. And gosh, and I could go anywhere, and someone will say, oh, well, recently had a doctor that said, you really need to cut back on your carbohydrates, not have any carbohydrates. Well, he doesn't get how much I work out. Well, I don't want to make it sound like I work out a lot, but I do, where I burn calories. I need that balance. And that's what it, to me, right there is key, is the balance, the emotional balance, the spiritual balance, and the physical balance. And finding that is with through different people, and just being, and that to me, that's the okay, is feeling balanced. Because when I'm balanced, I feel better and I can do anything, even if let's just say I'm 5 pounds overweight, you know, I'm going on a vacation in 2 weeks, getting into bathing suits, kind of scary, right? Um, I'm not scared today. It's like, it's okay. My husband, loves me. If I'm this weight, if I'm that weight, he still loves me. So I've got to get that out of my mind, because that was an old tape. Boys aren't going to like you if you're chubby. Um, it's like, "Ugh, Mom, why didn't you just say, hey, when I was over, I didn't have any boyfriends, or something, you know? And I try not to do that with my daughter. And I know it has affected her in some ways, but she's got, it amazes me is that it doesn't bother her. She can be at whatever weight she has, and be okay wearing with what she has. I noticed in the last couple of years, it's gone through another change, and it's the menopause. It's post menopause. All of a sudden, I have this little pooch. It's like, where did that come from? And it isn't something, well, my mom's passed, but it wasn't something she talked about, because it was always in a general way. And, but, I asked my mother in law, and she's like, oh, yeah, I have that. It came, and it's like, thank you. Because I thought, um, something's wrong. And every body is different. And I had to accept, I'm 5 foot, and I am petite. But I'm never going to have that, hourglass flat stomach that, these models, that's just not the way I'm built. And it's okay today.
I think that's one of the biggest things in this conversation, or in this space, that I certainly want to be a messenger for, is that women can respect their bodies at different sizes, right? Like, so the female body goes through so many different changes. I mean, just think about, like, when you first start your period, if you become, pregnant, and then perimenopause, and then menopause, and then stress and life. And, like, there's so many different opportunities for the body not to stay the same. And yes, certainly we want to keep health in mind, and we also still want to be able to respect our body as it changes.
Mhm.
Um, and it's not considered like um, you didn't do your job because you didn't stay the same size. So that's a huge part of the conversation.
Oh,
So
yeah.
for someone that may have a family member that is struggling with an eating disorder, and they're really concerned about them, or even from this conversation, they've realized for themselves or maybe for their family member, maybe this isn't healthy. What would you encourage them to do? What would be that next step?
Um, to get help, I'm approaching someone. If you approached me and said, you have an eating disorder, there's something wrong with you, then I would have, but if someone had come to me and said, hey, I'm really concerned about some of the things that you're doing, I think it's not in the best interest for you, or, hey, I'm here for you if you ever want to open, talk about what's going on. It just seems like you're really sad or something. Just opening up that dialogue. I just know I wouldn't tell anybody, oh, you've got an eating disorder or you're an alcoholic or, because that cuts off the communication. Um, if it was a family member, is, supporting them too. Um, and support means like my husband is very, very supportive, but sometimes he just doesn't get it. Like he'll put butter in there instead of, can I just have olive oil or something? Those are minor little things. He makes my meals. What am I complaining about? But I've been very, very fortunate that I have someone supportive. But it's having those conversations and as we kind of joke, putting my big girl panties on and just growing up. I started to grow up when I started getting help. I was 28 years old, couldn't make, my own hair appointments, was having my mom do it and, because fear of everything. And it's just, and I also today, I cannot do anything by myself. And I think that's important to stress with, someone going through this, and you're never too young because this started, third, fourth grade. I can remember identifying I needed to do this or that or hearing tapes. And then starting on the diets, really the diets did start in junior high. It was the diet pills that, you know, and not and not having the lady at the drugstore question me about it, you know, weird,
Just,
yeah.
yeah.
But
Yeah, and it's interesting because I mean, what you're describing is shame, right? Like keeping it quiet. No one needs to know. I'll be able to fix this. I just need to try harder. I can do this by myself. Like, right? Like that is shame that has a hold on the mind and makes you think that one, no one else is struggling with it. And two, that you will be able to eventually come up with a solution that solves it. And that's never the case because once we start being able to talk about it in light and not be shamed for it, right? Then that's when it can really release its hold.
right, and it's not about the food. It has nothing to do with the food. The trauma that I experienced as a child, I took with me because I wasn't opening up. I didn't know how to deal with it. So I chose food to, stuff, 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 stuff. And then when I finally couldn't stuff anymore and it just kind of exploded, then I could get the help. And that doesn't mean I just shared it with just anybody on the street. I shared it with safe people, people that were going to help me through it and not shame it because there was a problem underneath that needed to be addressed. And until I could get there, I had a friend in high school that she was anorexic and she died because she couldn't get past it. And everything's okay, 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 smart and just totally overachiever, everything had to be perfect and she couldn't be perfect and she couldn't take it anymore. It really made me sad because I would hate for anybody, to die over this. It's not worth it. And and thank God, I think we're actually, our society is moving over. It's been slow, but in a better direction than it has been. And to see that men, my brother's friends suffered with it all the time. It was always a big issue. Look how thin I am. Look at, I was a chubby kid. And it's like, what's really going on, and that's what I had to uncover, to discover, now to get past it, to recover. And, it's, I believe my eating disorder is always going to be there. And it's up to me to stay on top of it, to not give it the attention that it wants in a negative way, but to be proactive and say, you know what, I'm gonna I'm gonna do this, this, and this to help myself and give myself a break. You know, and if I do eat a bag of potato chips, oh well, it's not the end of the world. And that's, I just get back on it. I don't have to go, why did I do that? And all that and trying to figure out why. Well, I did it because I was anxious or I was angry at something. And if I could stop myself before I do that, that would be even better. And sometimes I can, okay, why am I turning to food? And it's usually, salty candy, something that used to be the forbidden, but not today. I can eat anything I want.
Yeah.
And that's freeing.
Well, and that's one of the biggest shifts, right? Like instead of getting super, like going super critical on yourself, you got curious, right? Like you asked yourself, like, what is going on, right? What do you need? And usually it's not, it might be a good nourishing meal, but it's usually other aspects of self-care that we need to tap into.
Absolutely.
So looking back, what would you share with your younger self?
Oh, wow. That it's going to be okay, and that life isn't as scary as I think it was. Um, man, I would have saved myself a lot of misery, but I had to go through what I had to go through to get to here today. This is just my story. Some people, that eating disorders hospital, there was a 15-year-old girl there and she was doing awesome. I lost contact with her, but that's awesome. And then there were older ladies in there. This disease does not discriminate on age or nationality, culture. I mean, it's everywhere. So I would tell, be gentle, and you're going to be okay. I think that's the biggest thing. I've always just wanted to be okay. And okay to me is that balanced. I'm not better than, I'm not less than, just okay. I can breathe.
So you kind of hinted to some of the misconceptions as it relates to eating disorders. What other ones do you feel like are like nowadays are big misconceptions as it relates to someone with an eating disorder?
That carbohydrates are bad, and sugar, you can't have any sugar. Well, I think that was the biggest. What I have learned, through the years, though, that if I do choose to have like, a half of a dessert, like I'll share a dessert with my husband, that when I have sugar, in, it takes me 3 to 5 days to get that little craving out. And I know it's a craving. Ooh, I know it's a craving. And I just kind of fight it. Um, Find something else to do because I know what it is. And I just sometimes it's just not given into it. But it has nothing to do with lack of uh, self will. It has nothing to do with, oh, you're not a strong person. I am pretty strong. It's sometimes I have to just turn it over to something that is greater than me and say, here, you know what, you take it because I'm not doing a good job today. And then talking to people, in an OA program or any kind of program, say, okay, what's the issue? So that, the sugar, and then I used to think that, this whole gluten thing was a joke and stuff and but it's not. I have a sister-in-law that really is gluten intolerant. I have recently, I did that test of like what I'm allergic to. Um, and some of the things on there, like it's almost like I thought it. I don't know why, but dairy. I didn't realize dairy was a lot about the bloating, and I've cut back. And wow, what a difference it makes. That's not to say that I won't have, cheese on a sandwich. It's it's more of, okay, what am I eating within that day, that week? Because if I have, well, I don't drink milk anymore, but if I decide to have, some yogurt, a tablespoon of yogurt or so, I'm not having a half a cup or a cup. It's that excessive. And I watch throughout the day what can be a dairy product. And I found other choices I like. I actually like vegetables. I
Yeah.
like fruit, but then, I got to be careful with fruit sometimes because I can overdo anything. I could be, uh, obsessive compulsive on water. Make sure I get, and that helps a lot. You know, the the sugar, no eating carbohydrates. What else was there? I don't know. Every day, one thing is that social media is not real. A lot of it is not real. And that I have to be careful that, oh, you do this for 30 days and you will look like this. Well, I'm never going to look like that. First of all, that's not the way my body looks.
Mhm.
And, I always want to call it false advertisement then, but I'm open to maybe it does. Maybe the average person, normal person, someone can do that and they're okay. But I think twice about it because whenever I want to do one of those, yeah, it might be good at first, but then in the long run, no, the long run is having a healthy for me is having that healthy relationship with food, not coming, falling for the gimmicks, not beating myself up, and listening and helping others. That's a big part of it is helping others.
Yeah. Well, and also like that may work for that person, but does it work for you? Right. Like, and really generating that self-awareness of what works best for your body. And that really, I think that that's part of that health conversation because it certainly looks different for each person.
Right. And that's what I had to do with you when we were doing one-on-ones. It's getting curious because I had these, oh, I can't eat that. That's a bad food. And it wasn't. I still don't have me eating fish, but I just still like fish.
There's such differences. And, actually that is a great point, Rae-Anne, because there's differences between a preference, an allergy, and an intolerance,
Right.
right? Like, so we all have preferences with our food. Some people like fish, some do not, right? That's a preference. Some people can eat gluten, some cannot, right? Like, so this is where we get into the nuances of nutrition, that it's not one label fits all, right? So we
Yeah.
have to like what fits for you and how do we make that work so that you feel your best. And some people can count calories and track their macros. Some people it sends them into a tailspin, is more anxiety, more depression, more, right? So we just are mindful of the person. Okay.
Yeah. And sometimes I think, like I'm gonna do my magic wand and it'll just be so easy. But some days are and some days aren't. It's just like me.
Yeah. Well, what is one thing that you have just like that you kind of repeat on a daily basis, maybe, or that like was one of your big takeaways that you would like to share with others in this healing journey?
I think the biggest thing is for me, it was finding a higher power, that I couldn't do this by myself. I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to let others know, safe people of what's going on and finding um, the right people to call, to ask and not be afraid. I start my morning in, prayer and meditation and then I go and do some movement. And then I come back and I, have a healthy breakfast. And like right now, it's like told my husband, I don't want any more eggs. I'm tired of eggs, and so I had a protein shake. Well, protein shakes don't always do it for me. And I know that. So I'm a little bit more conscious of it. So it's just kind of staying in routine, but being willing to take suggestions from others. And when I mean from others, I mean from ones that are going through the same thing that I'm going through, or like a nutritionist like you that say, hey, maybe you can try this. If I cut myself off and say, this is the only way and get really rigid, I'm going to end up right back where I was. So I think the key for me is being willing and being open and being honest.
Mm. Isn't that the hardest part?
Yes. Because some days it's like,
Yeah.
and then Sunday, it's Monday. I love Mondays, you know, I'm going to go play cards today with this women's group. And, my mind already has gone through what's the food going to be? Oh my gosh, because I don't like eating in front of people because I always think it's not, I don't, I don't do it right. So then, I breathe and like earlier, I said, "Just let it go. It's going to be fine, and if I go in with that slow, I'm okay, then I'm okay. So when I'm like going a mile a minute, and the trick's like, okay, what? Maybe I'll have a handful of nuts and um, some vegetable before I go, just so that I'm not, starving.
Mm. Yeah. So as we close out today, what would you share with someone that is struggling with an eating disorder and they're a little nervous to seek help?
Um, yeah, it's okay to be nervous. It is, but don't let that fear paralyze you from getting help because it only gets worse. It will never get better on its own. And reaching out and saying, you know what, I'm going to stop this so the cycle stops and that you have a chance at life to enjoy life. There's so many years I didn't enjoy life because I was so obsessed with something else. And now I enjoy life and being present. That's what it's all about. I am not in the bondage of the food. No, get help. It's okay. Everybody has a starting point, and the starting point is admitting I got a problem and then moving forward. That's the hardest part is admitting you have a problem and then moving forward and getting help.
Yeah. I like to say it's the journey of proving yourself wrong.
Yes, and I do it all the time.
Yes, that is the hardest part, but where most of the healing, well, I would say all of the healing happens. So,
Yeah.
Rae-Anne, thank you so much for sharing with us. I know that someone's going to hear this and resonate with all of it or portions of it, and it's going to help someone also heal. So thank you for being courageous to share your story.
Absolutely. I just hope they look at the similarities and not the differences.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're welcome, Jana. Thank you.
This has been Talkin' Shit. If you like this episode, please give it a thumbs up or leave a review on the Apple Podcast app. If you want more episodes, click that subscribe button. And if you want to learn more, visit healthwins.org. Talkin' Shit is produced and hosted by me, Jana. This production is also made possible by the Community Media Access Collaborative. Learn more at cmac.tv. See you next time.